In the fertile village of Agburmu, where the river Osen whispered through groves of cocoa and yam fields, two childhood friends stood at the crossroads of fate. The morning sun had just begun to warm the dewy earth, casting a soft golden glow on the tilled soil. The air smelled of fresh foliage and promise. Please subscribe, like, and comment. Subscription is free. Kunle, tall and lanky with sleepy eyes and a half-chewed piece of sugarcane between his teeth, leaned lazily against his hoe. His shirt clung to him, not from sweat, but from the dampness of the morning mist. He sighed heavily and looked skyward. These clouds, Ade. They are full of blessings. Rain will do the work for me this year. Beside him, Ade was already waist-deep in a trench, his hands covered in red soil. Sweat trickled down his temples as he worked methodically. Kunle, a farm gives only what you give it. If you feed the land with laziness, it will feed you with shame. Kunle chuckled, kicking a small rock. My friend, you work as if you're building a palace under the soil. Relax. I have a plan. There's a shortcut to everything. All that digging won't grow you any faster than me. Ade paused and looked at him, eyes serious. The land knows who loves it, Kunle. And it remembers. But Kunle only laughed louder, walking off toward the palm grove, leaving footprints on soil he had no intention of turning. The sun was rising high over Agburmu when Bola, the village beauty and the daughter of the blacksmith, came gracefully down the winding path that led to the stream. Her feet barely stirred the dust, and the water pot balanced perfectly on her head as she hummed a hymn passed down from her grandmother. Kunle spotted her from afar and quickly ran to intercept her, brushing imaginary dirt off his wrapper and straightening his faded cap. Ah, Bola! The river flows today because you walk beside it. Even the trees bend to greet you. Bola smiled politely, her eyes calm and unreadable. Kunle, your tongue is as sweet as palm wine. But a river does not flow on compliments. What have your hands done this morning? Kunle scratched his head. I supervised the land. The clouds told me it would rain, so I am waiting. Timing is everything, you know. Just then Ade approached quietly, his arms full of firewood, sweat soaking through his shirt. He nodded respectfully. Good morning, Bola. Let me carry that for you. He took the pot from her head gently. She watched him silently for a moment and said, Thank you, Ade. May your hands never lack strength. Kunle stood awkwardly, trying to think of something clever. Bola turned to him. Supervising the sky is not the same as tilling the earth, Kunle. Frustrated by Bola's indifference and Ade's growing favor among the villagers, Kunle made his way to the edge of the forest, where Baba Ifagbemi lived. The herbalist's compound was thick with smoke and the scent of dried herbs. Old charms hung from the trees, clinking softly in the wind. Kunle knelt, holding a bottle of palm wine and a goat as offering. Baba Ifagbemi, I need your help. I want the best harvest in the village. I want plants that grow fast and strong without sweat. The old man's eyes, cloudy with age, studied him. You want to reap where you have not sown? Are you sure, Kunle? Wealth gained without sweat is a curse. Kunle smiled arrogantly. I don't need much, just enough to impress Bola and silence the whispers. With a sigh, Baba handed him a small calabash. Inside were glowing seeds that shimmered unnaturally. Plant these under the full moon. But know this, nothing grows from nothing. Kunle took the seeds greedily and left, blind to the warnings in the wind. As the moon waned, Ade continued to till his fields from dawn to dusk. The muscles in his back ached, but he welcomed the pain. He mixed ash into the soil, watched for pests, and watered by hand. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. Omomi, toil with pride. Even the gods bless the hands that labor. The other farmers sometimes scoffed. Ade, you work too hard. Haven't you seen Kunle's land? It is as green as Eden, and he hasn't lifted a finger. Ade only smiled, wiping his brow. Let's see whose barn sings at harvest. Kunle, meanwhile, lounged under the palm trees. His enchanted crops grew rapidly, too rapidly. He grinned smugly at passers-by. See what intelligence does. I rest, yet I reap. But Bola walked by one afternoon and frowned. The plants looked green, yes, but their roots wobbled oddly in the wind. Something didn't sit right. The village buzzed with whispers. Bola, the pride of Agburmu, would soon choose a suitor. The elders debated among themselves. She must marry a man with sense, one said. No, another countered. She needs a man who works like Ade. Kunle, confident in his magical crops, dressed in his finest agbada, and went to visit Bola's compound. He brought silk scarves from Abadan and a carved comb he claimed came from Oyo. Bola, he began, his tone dripping with charm, my farm flourishes, my home is full. Be my queen, and the stars shall serve you. Bola looked at the gifts but said nothing. Later that evening, Ade arrived dusty and tired, but carrying a basket of vegetables, cassava, okra, yam, and fresh ugu leaves. Baba Alagbade, he said respectfully, placing the food down, your family should not lack. I hope this finds you well. Bola's father, watching from the doorway, said thoughtfully, words are wind, but a man's harvest speaks the truth. Bola watched them both, her decision forming not from promises, but from proof. The sky darkened as the rainy season approached. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Kunle's enchanted plants had grown even taller, but the leaves began to curl at the edges. The stems swayed too easily, lacking strength. He ignored the signs, busy preparing for a grand harvest celebration. I will invite musicians from Ilorin. I will roast a whole goat. They will see who the real farmer is. Bola came to the field one day, curious. She bent and examined the soil. Her hands brushed over the base of a maize stalk. It came loose in her grip. Kunle, your plants are shallow. The roots do not grip. Are you sure they are strong? Kunle scoffed. Bola, you worry too much. My crops are fine. Wait until you see the feast. But the skies began to open, and what came next would wash away his illusion. A heavy storm struck Agburmu that night. The winds howled like angry spirits, and the rain fell in torrents. By morning, Kunle's field looked like a graveyard. Most of the plants had collapsed. Their roots had rotted, revealing blackened mush and swarming insects. Kunle ran to Baba Ifagbemi's hut, soaked and desperate. Baba, you must help me. The plants, they are dying. Everything is turning to waste. The old man sat quietly, his eyes closed. I warned you, Kunle. Magic cannot do what sweat must. Even the gods despise deceit. Kunle dropped to his knees, weeping. The birds in the trees did not stop singing. Meanwhile, Ade's fields stood strong. His crops swayed with health. Bola walked through them with quiet wonder. She saw every row, every vine, and every sign of effort. She said to herself, here is a man whose harvest was earned, not wished for. Kunle stood in the middle of his wilted field, his hands trembling as he surveyed the wreckage. The once proud stalks of maize now lay flattened, their roots shallow, their leaves decayed. He tried to lift one, only for it to crumble in his hands like ashes. The sweet scent of young corn had turned sour with mildew and loss. He walked back to his home, silent and slow. The villagers watched him from behind their doors and woven curtains. Whispers followed him like shadows. At his compound, he dropped onto a stool and held his head in his hands. His mother came out, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist, her voice soft. Omomi, you planted charms instead of effort. Now you reap shame instead of food. That evening, he made his way to Bola's house under the veil of dusk. His agbada was now dusty, and the once proud Kunle had no gifts, no smile, only a plea. Bola, he began, forgive my foolishness. I see now the error of my ways. Give me another chance. I swear I will work. I will prove myself. Bola looked at him for a long time. Her voice was calm but firm. Kunle, the heart of a man is shown not in regret but in discipline. You planted deception and it bloomed. A second chance must be earned, not begged for. The annual Yam festival in Agburmu was a time of celebration, gratitude, and judgment. Drums echoed through the village, dancers circled under palm torches, and the king of the village sat on his stool of honor, blessing the farmers who brought offerings from their fields. Ade stood tall, carrying baskets of large, healthy yams, his hands still dusted with soil. His family, including elderly women and young children, surrounded him with pride. Bola stood beside him, dressed in a beautiful Ankara wrapper, her smile soft but steady. The king called Ade forward. "This is a man whose hands have honored the earth. For your diligence, I grant you the river plots beyond the shrine. May they bring you fortune." Cheers rang out. The talking drums praised Ade's name. In the shadows beyond the firelight, Kunle stood alone, his wrapper torn at the edge, eyes hollow. His offering had rotted days ago. No one called his name. His mother sat beside him, placing a hand on his knee. Even a broken calabash can hold water again. But it must first be mended. Kunle nodded, but the bitterness in his chest was heavy. He had mocked the gods of labor, and now they mocked him in silence. The harmattan arrived early that year, dry winds scattering leaves and dust across the land. Ade was already preparing the next rotation of crops, turning his soil gently, ensuring it rested well. Bola brought him cool water and new seed yams. Kunle, meanwhile, wandered from compound to compound, begging for leftover seed. Some gave, most refused. Trust, once broken, was harder to rebuild than the land. He took to waking early and working late, trying to mimic Ade's steps. He even asked to join Ade one day. "Let me learn properly like a child," he said quietly. Ade, ever kind, nodded. "But this road is long, Kunle, and your legs must not grow tired." Kunle tried. He worked. But the hunger gnawed at him, and the old debts followed like vultures. One afternoon, he collapsed in his half-cleared plot. Villagers found him and carried him to Mama Alake, the healer. For days he lay in fever and weakness. Bola sent herbs through Ade. She never came by herself. On the 7th day, as the cock crowed and the mist returned to the river, Kunle exhaled a final breath. He was buried near the edge of the village, beneath a tree that bore no fruit. Moral: hard work is the true path to harvest. Even charm, magic, and shortcuts fall flat before the patient hands of the diligent. As the Yoruba say, "Seni ogunayesi." Hard work is the cure for poverty. Several moons had passed since Kunle's burial. Life in Agbermu continued, as it always did, steady and cyclical. The air still smelled of yam mounds and wood smoke, and the river still sang its old song. But a quiet absence lingered near Kunle's old farm, where weeds had begun to reclaim the land. One morning, a woman appeared at the village square, Kunle's widow from a distant village. Her name was Marank, and she carried a child on her back. Her eyes were tired but fierce. She approached the elders. "My husband died in your village. My son deserves to know what kind of man his father was." The elders shifted uneasily. Baba Alagbade finally stood. "Your husband." Kunle was a man of great potential, but his laziness cursed him. He chased shadows, not labor. Marank's eyes glistened. "Then let my son learn from that truth. But also let him learn from the man who did right. Where is this Ade?" Marank found Ade tending to his cassava plot, his frame bent over a stubborn root. She waited until he rose, then stepped forward. "I am Marank," she said. "You knew Kunle well. I brought his son Ao. He must learn from someone who understands honor." Ade was surprised but composed. He offered them food and water. As they ate, he looked at the boy, skinny, observant, curious. "Let him stay," Ade said at last. "Let him learn the way of the cutlass, not the way of the tongue." And so Ao began his apprenticeship. Ade showed him how to soften hard soil, how to know when rain would come by the scent in the air, how to tie a goat's leg with care, and how to thank the earth with every harvest. Bola often brought Ao books and fruits. She grew fond of the boy and watched silently as Ade began to laugh again. One dry season evening, news arrived from a neighboring town. Kunle's father, a wealthy cocoa trader, had passed. Rumor spread that Kunle's son might be the sole heir. The villagers gathered at the square. Will the boy leave? Will he forget the land that saved him? Moraunt came to Ade. What should I do? This could change our lives. But wealth scares me. You saw what it did to Kunle. Ade thought deeply. Wealth without wisdom is like a basket with no bottom. If you go, go with sense. If you stay, stay with purpose. Ao overheard the talk. That night he told Ade, I want to stay. The land is my inheritance. The farm is my father now. Ade placed a hand on his head. Then may the soil always recognize you. The village expected it, but they still whispered when Bola and Ade finally sat before the elders to declare their intention to wed. The sun was high, and the talking drum played softly in the background. He is not the richest, Bola said, eyes fixed on Ade. But he is the richest in character. And I would rather share a calabash with a man of honor than sleep on silk beside a lazy one. The elders nodded. Baba Alagbade, her father, beamed. My daughter, your words are wealth. Ao danced beside the couple, laughing with the joy of one who had known loss and found family anew. That evening, as palm oil lamps flickered in the breeze, Ade and Bola sat beneath the tree Kunle had once mocked. Its branches were still bare, but they planted seeds at its roots. Let this tree finally grow with purpose, Bola whispered. Under Ade's influence, the village council began reforms. A communal farming program was launched to help young men who struggled. Bola started a literacy center beside the shrine, where women taught girls and boys the ways of the world and the land. Ao became the face of this future. His hands carried a hoe in the day and a slate at night. His laughter returned to the compound that once echoed with silence. Baba Ifagbemi, now nearly blind, sent a gourd of sacred ash to Ade. For the one who did not ask for magic but earned miracles, he said. And the barren tree by Kunle's grave? One morning it bloomed. A single fruit hung from its branch, golden in the sunlight. The villagers gathered in awe. Let the boy have it, Ade said. Let the next harvest begin with remembrance. The sun had just dipped behind the hills when a horse-drawn cart rolled into Agbermu. Atop it sat a man in a long blue agbada with a black walking cane and a leather satchel strapped to his side. His skin was fairer than most, and his tongue carried an accent, foreign yet distinctly Yoruba. The villagers gathered in the square, curious. The man dismounted with ease and bowed before the elders. My name is Chief Worley from Ibadan. I seek land, rich land, to begin a plantation. Your fame has reached the cities. I come in peace. Baba Alagbade narrowed his eyes. Plantation? What will you plant, stranger? Worley smiled politely. Palm, cocoa, and progress. I will pay handsomely for your river plots. The village murmured. Ade stood still, his brow furrowed. Chief Worley brought gifts, kegs of palm wine, embroidered wrappers, bundles of cash. He distributed them carefully, smiling, whispering promises. He approached Ade quietly one morning at the farm. You work hard, farmer. I admire that. But what's the use of sweat if gold can do the same? Sell me your plots. I will make you manager. You will not need to bend again. Ade looked at the earth under his feet. He bent down, scooped a handful of soil, and let it run through his fingers. Then he said, I earned this land not with coins, but with calluses. What I've sown here is not for sale. Worley smirked. Even roots can be pulled if the price is right. Not mine, Ade replied. And not this village. But not everyone in Agbermu agreed with Ade. Some younger farmers, eager for wealth, began holding secret meetings. They wanted Worley's money. They saw the future in factories, not farms. Bola heard the whispers first. They say Ade stands in the way of progress, she told her father. They're thinking of voting him off the council. Baba Alagbade growled. Fools! They forget too soon. One night, someone placed a palm leaf, an old Yoruba warning, at Ade's gate. It was a silent threat. The next morning, he found his irrigation trench sabotaged, the water diverted. The tension grew. Chief Worley grew bolder. He offered to rebuild the market, give scholarships, even sponsor a new well. To win over the elders, he proposed a test. Let us burn the old tree by Kunle's grave. If it burns, then your way is dead. If not, let me leave. The elders hesitated, but the youth pressured them. Let the land speak. A crowd gathered. Worley poured kerosene at the roots and lit a match. Flames leapt into the air. But just as quickly rain fell, sudden, heavy, miraculous. The flames died. The tree stood firm. One fruit dropped at Ade's feet. The elders called it a sign. The youth could not argue with the rain. Chief Worley, though smiling, knew he was beaten. That evening he met Ade one last time. You've won for now. But the city always returns. When it does, I hope your roots still hold. Ade nodded. Let them come. We'll still be here. The villagers came together that night and cleared Kunle's old plot. Ao planted his first yam mound there. Bola placed a carved sign, "Here lies the lesson." And as stars blinked into the sky, the village of Agburmu sang, not of wealth, but of wisdom preserved. 2 seasons after Worley's departure, the skies began to misbehave. Rain came late and left early. The earth cracked under the sun's merciless glare. Wells dried. Streams whispered no more. It was the worst drought Agburmu had seen in 30 years. Ade and the other farmers worked harder than ever, digging deeper trenches, conserving every drop. But the yams shriveled, the maize stalks grew thin, and the cassava turned to bark in the soil. We were prepared for men like Worley, Bola whispered one night, as she sat beside Ade beneath the stars. But not for the gods to turn their backs. The village elders called for sacrifices. Drums beat through the night, but no rain came. With each passing moon, Agburmu grew quieter. Children stopped playing in the square. The festival was cancelled for the first time in generations. Ao tried to replant his late father's old plot, now redeemed through hard work, but nothing took root. Ade stood beside him, silently devastated. "What are we doing wrong, Baba Ade?" Ao asked. Ade crouched beside him and gently picked up the hardened seed. Sometimes the earth simply closes its mouth. Even the most faithful farmer cannot force it to speak. It wasn't laziness this time. It was nature. And for a village that prided itself on labor, this felt like betrayal. Slowly, the younger generation began to slip away. First it was Shehi, the baker's son, then Tolu, the teacher's daughter. They left for the cities, Lagos, Ibadan, Abeokuta, seeking opportunities beyond cracked soil. Bola tried to hold literacy classes. Few children came. Ade tried to lead planting workshops. The benches were empty. One night, at the village council, Baba Alagbade banged his staff. "We have worked with our hands. Where is our reward? Have the gods gone deaf?" A smaller voice from the back answered, "Maybe it is not the gods. Maybe this land has given all it could." Silence followed. It began with smoke, then flames. A brush fire swept down from the hills one dry harmattan morning. It moved quickly, devouring bush, goats, and part of Ade's last field. The villagers ran with buckets, shouting, throwing sand. Bola led the women in chants. Ao worked until his palms blistered. By nightfall, the fire had been tamed. But half the village's remaining food stores were gone. That night, Ade sat outside, his hands covered in ash. Bola knelt beside him. "What will we do now?" she asked. He did not answer. His silence said enough. Months later, Ade took ill. The healer said it was the body finally giving in to too many seasons of strain. Bola nursed him, and Ao wept quietly outside the hut each night. Before he died, Ade asked to be buried beside Kunle's tree, the same tree that once defied flames. "We both made choices," he whispered to Ao. "Let mine remind you that effort is not always rewarded here. But it is still right." After the burial, Bola stood before the village. Her voice shook. "We are not failing because of laziness. We are failing because we depend on only one way of life. Let us change. Let us learn. Let us survive. And for the first time in many moons, the villagers nodded, not in defeat but in realization. After Aid's burial, a hush fell over Agburmu that never truly lifted. The yam barns were nearly empty. The river trickled like a whisper of its former self. Children grew thinner, and the old ones passed quietly in their sleep. Bola tried to keep the village together. She organized rationing. Ao taught children how to read under the mango tree. But survival wore down their strength. Then came a final announcement from the king's messenger. The government would not intervene. Agburmu was no longer listed on the new regional development plans.